In this video, we're going to look at how to create a tilt shift video, which is basically adding an effect to make the footage look like it's a miniature model. Typically, to do this, it might work better using time-lapse photography, but we're going to just use video clips and apply some effects to make this look that way. So I've got a couple different clips here. First, we've got these containers being moved, and then second, we've got this city street. Now, this effect probably works better when a camera is on a tripod and locked into position, and then if you want to move it after the fact, you can do that while you're editing. There's a few things that go into this effect to making it look real. So the first thing to make it look like a miniature toy model is to oversaturate the colors, possibly increase the brightness and contrast as well. And then we will increase the speed, and then we will posterize the time, which will basically try to mimic the look of time-lapse photography by changing the frame rate to something lower. And then finally we'll add some blur to the shots. So let's first of all go ahead on this clip, and we're going to add our color. So here in the color workspace inside of Premiere, going to first go in and increase the exposure. That looks good, and it's quite a bit faded, so you can add contrast here if you'd like. You can also do the same thing down here in the curves. So in addition to exposure and contrast, another good thing to do is add saturation. So we start to pull up the saturation. You don't want to go up too far, but you do want to add a level of saturation that is beyond what looks realistic. So something like that's good. And then if you want to take it even a step farther, you can come down here into the curves and into the hue saturation curves, and you have control of each individual color. So maybe we want to increase the saturation on these yellow crates. We could do that by taking the hue saturation eyedropper, selecting that color. It'll isolate it, and then we could increase those specific colors if we'd like, or we could even change those colors with the hue versus hue to something else. Try to make it look a little more hyper realistic, and you can adjust colors that way. But once you get it where you like it, that's probably good there. So here's the before and here's the after. So that looks better already. Now if we go and just look through this clip, this just slowly moves up. If I play it at real speed, you can see it's very, very slow. It's about a minute long. And at the end of the clip, we get this car that just slowly drives through. So next thing we're going to do is speed this clip up, and the speed to speed it up to depends on what it is, your footage, how your footage looks. So I'm going to go and right click on this footage, go to speed and duration, and let's try, probably want to go somewhere between 400 and 1,000. This clip's pretty slow moving to start with, so I'm going to go ahead and go straight to 1,000, and that's going to shrink it way down. If I play that back, you can see it goes pretty quick, a little bit choppy. Just to help it play back better, I'm going to turn the playback resolution down for now. So it's going to move up, move over, the car is going to drive through, and just the car going at that speed, at that size, makes it look like a miniature toy as well. Next thing we're going to do is add an effect called posterize time to change the frame rate to something lower. If we select the clip and look at the information, this clip is currently playing at 30 frames per second. So to add that effect, we're going to go into the effects, search for posterize time. There's two of those. Make sure you get the posterize time and not the posterize. We'll drop that onto the clip, and then we will change the frame rate down to something maybe more like somewhere around 8. And you can see that has turned it red. There's enough effects on here. Computer's not going to be able to generate a great playback, but since we're playing at a lower resolution, it looks like it might work okay. A little bit choppy, looks a little better. And then the final touch is to add some sort of blur. So let's go in here and search for a blur. I'm going to drop that onto the clip, and you'll see that that shows up. you've got a couple options, right? You can get a preset shape for a mask. You can also draw your own. I'm going to go ahead and draw my own in this one. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to simply click across the frames and I'm going to enclose that, and I want this to make sure and be covering the entire top. From there you want to come down to the blurriness and you can increase or decrease that to a level you think it looks pretty good. I'm also going to feather the change in this to make it look a little bit better, and you can adjust that as needed. And then I'd probably add one most times to the bottom of this, but I do want to see that car, so I'm just going to actually leave that alone. And then you get something that looks somewhat like this. And if we sped this up even maybe a little bit more, you can see how it can look like a miniature model. Now let's look at the next clip. Okay, this clip is not really locked down on a tripod. You can see there's some movement in this clip, which is going to make it a little more difficult. So to start off with, we're actually going to stabilize this and try to remove the motion. So we're going to use an effect called the warp stabilizer and drag that and drop it onto the clip. And basically what that's going to do is analyze every single frame of these 600 frames in this clip and try to move them all together to reduce the motion in the clip. And actually, rather than smooth motion, I want no motion. So I'm going to change that. And it will continue to analyze. Once it's finished, depending on how much it was shaking in the first place, it's going to zoom in slightly because it's going to move every frame of this to try to make there be no motion. And you can see the before and the after, so it did zoom in just a little bit. And if we play this back now, you can see there's very little motion at all, which will actually work out pretty well. There's a little bit right at the end. So next step is to go ahead and select the clip and go into the color. I'm going to increase the exposure, bring down the highlights a little bit. It's a little bit bright in some areas. Going to also increase the contrast maybe a little bit, and especially the saturation. After that, we're going to speed it up. So if you right click and go to speed and duration and try to change the speed to something else, let's try 600. When we go to the clip, you'll notice that it says you can't use warp stabilizer and speed on the same clip, which is true. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And here's how you would do it instead. You would need to take the clip, right click on it, and you're going to nest it. Basically create a new sequence, a new timeline for it. And once you've done that, now you can actually go in and do speed and duration. And if we play this back now, starting to see the effect. Looks more like a miniature model. Now we're going to add that posterized time. Let's try 12 frames per second this time. Turn back the playback resolution down just a bit. And then finally, to try to sell that effect, I'm going to add some blur. So drop on the blur and decide where in your image you would like that blur to be. Go ahead and feather this once again. It gradually changes like last time. And this time I'm going to add a second mask. So I'm going to click again. And I'm going to pick somewhere down here on the bottom. If you can't quite get to where you need to, you can always zoom out a bit, which is helpful. And we'll do this exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and feather this as well. And now if we go back in and look at the clip, you can see that that blur really helps, and if it needs to be more, you can select the piece of mask that you need, and you can increase, the blurriness to whatever level makes it look better. And then you play that. All those things in combination help that to look like a miniature toy model. And to really get this, we need to render it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you'll see this when we're finished rendering. To render, you're just going to hit enter, and it'll put all those effects together so they can play back at real time. And here are the 2 completed clips. And that is how you create a tilt shift video.